To our week 1 asynchronous session for English 11A. Thank you for watching the video. As you have been notified, to access the asynchronous session, you need to reach out to me either by phone, portal message, text, etc. to request the session if you are unable to attend the synchronous session for the week. That being said, the quizzes are password protected. You'll be given an access code during the course of this video. So after the video is over, and I'll remind you of this at the end, you will be going to the quizzes tab in our course, and you will be opening up the quizzes and selecting on the week 1 quiz for this presentation, and you'll be asked for an access code, and I will tell you what that access code is during the course of this video. I'm not going to give it all to you at once. We are going to disseminate that information throughout the video. So as I give you the pieces of the password or access code, please make sure you are writing them down so that you don't have to try to locate them again after you're done watching the video. All right, so let's get started. Today we are going to be reading for the main idea, or practicing reading for the main idea. In English 11A, we do a lot of informational and informative reading. We do some research reading. We do reading nonfiction. So I want you to practice the skills of reading for main idea in a piece of nonfiction. So that's our objective today, to be able to read a piece of nonfiction for main idea and supporting detail. Now, the reason the supporting detail is listed in there in the objective is because it is difficult to understand what a main idea is without also being able to identify the supporting detail. The supporting detail is going to lend information to us to help us understand what that main idea is. So that is our objective today. So when we're finding the main purpose, let's first discuss what a main purpose is, or a main idea in a text. Everything that we read has a main idea or a purpose, whether we're reading fiction or nonfiction. So in nonfiction, the text is trying to persuade, inform, or educate the reader. If we're reading for pleasure or for entertainment, we're reading fiction, then our purpose would be to be entertained. So all writers sit down and write with this purpose in mind. They're trying to persuade us, inform us, or educate us if it's a nonfiction piece. And we also have narrative nonfiction, like memoir nonfiction, and that also incorporates some level of persuasion or information or education, as well as entertainment. Today we're going to be focusing specifically on informational text and identifying the main purpose in that informational text. So where's the main idea? Well, it kind of depends on how long our piece is, but typically the main idea is in the first few paragraphs. And this main idea is going to indicate to us what the reader is going to discuss. Oh, I just should say the writer, what the writer is going to discuss for the remainder of the piece of writing. So as readers, we want to identify the main idea at the beginning of the text, and this will allow us to understand if the text that we're reading is the one that we need to be reading. So let's pretend we're doing research and we're reading those first couple paragraphs. We might get to the main idea and be like, oh, this is not what I thought it was. This piece of information or this informational text will not be useful to me. So it's important to be able to understand what we're looking for and why. All right, and so let's talk a little bit about some strategies that can help us with identifying the main idea. These are all reading strategies that you hopefully are familiar with. These are just different things that I would like you to try doing if you don't do them already, as we progress through the lessons this week, because you will be reading some informational text for me. So let's start with the before reading strategies. So when you sit down, I want you to think for a second. When you sit down now and you begin reading a text, do you do anything before you start reading? Do you just sit down and start reading? Or do you have some ideas of things that you do beforehand? If you don't do anything yet, or if you don't do any of these things, then I'm going to encourage you to try them this week. Before reading, I want you to set a purpose, which in this class will be set for you because you're reading for information or you're reading for research. You're reading for a particular reason. So we want to set our purpose. If I'm going to sit down and read my book for fun, then I'm reading for entertainment. If I am trying to figure out which program to enroll my children into, after school, I'm going to be reading for information. So we have to set our purpose. What do we want to get out of the reading session? The second one is to preview the text. You already do this probably without recognizing it. You're going to read the title before you begin reading the text. So that's previewing the text. I also like to kind of scroll through the text. Are there pictures with captions? Are there diagrams? Are there graphs? Are there any visual aids that can help me understand what's to come, or that can help me with some information as I read? This will also allow me to activate my background knowledge. So background knowledge is information you bring to the reading of the text already. So for example, if I said to you, we're going to read the Gettysburg Address by Abraham Lincoln. Even though I've only given you those two pieces of information, the title and the speaker of the Gettysburg Address, you have background knowledge. If you've never read it before, you've been educated on who Abraham Lincoln is. So you can already identify, oh, okay, so if it was by Abraham Lincoln, he was the president during the Civil War, so you already have a historical setting. You already know who the speaker is. You understand the time period in which he was speaking. So you're bringing that background knowledge with you to the reading of the speech, even if you've never read it before. So activating our background knowledge and understanding what it is that we already know about the topic before we read will help us understand what we are reading. And the last one is prediction. Now, this one really applies to fiction, but it can be utilized with nonfiction pieces, informational pieces. So you can predict not necessarily the outcome of what you're going to be reading, but the relevance to what you're looking for. All right, so I'm going to pause right there, and I am going to give you the first letter, or the first two letters of your password. So the first two are R and A. They're all going to be lower caps. So your first two letters are R and A. All right, so let's talk about during reading. So during reading, you're going to be focusing on utilizing these elements of strategy. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard the word annotate, but when you annotate, you basically scribe or take notes on what you're reading, but you're doing it as you're reading. So think about in previous classes, teachers have asked you to identify different words or context clues, things in the text that you find to be important as you read. These are going to be helpful to you as you are activating what you know, what you already know, as you go through. So I would encourage you to keep a notebook or a piece of paper next to you and write down the information that you either have questions about, etc. as you go, as you're doing the reading. And that's what cross-checking is. So you're going to be annotating, and cross-checking is a strategy for ensuring that the words that you're reading make sense, and that they match what the pictures or the diagrams or the charts on stage, to make sure that you're understanding what you're reading. I just said on stage, on the page. It's like stage and page rhyme. I don't know where stage came from. But during this stage of reading, you're going to cross-check to make sure you're understanding what you're reading, that it makes sense to you. And if it doesn't make sense to you, this is where you can, identify paragraph 3. I have a question mark. I don't understand this part. You can question the text. Reread. You're going to reread the selections that you don't understand. You're going to go back to those sections after you've done reading the entire informational text to see which parts you didn't understand, if they are more clear now that you've finished the entire selection. And this is where you can also identify what questions you do still have, or which elements of the text stand out to you that you find to be important. Confirm predictions. Is there anything in there that you already knew, that you can connect your background knowledge to, that you can identify as being an important element in the text? Were your predictions of how useful or unuseful this was to you? What can you include in your notes to help remember or to help identify the important elements of the text? And the last one is to review, to go back over and identify those questions, identify those words that stuck out to you, identify any words you might have circled or underlined if you have the book in front of you, or that you've written down on your notebook that you're keeping next to the computer. And then to understand and synthesize what information you can walk away from. And this is where we're going to be like, okay, this is what this text is about. The main idea of this text is X, and I know that because of Y. When we take notes as we read, and if we do these strategies as we read, we will have a better understanding of the text. But when we go back to the text to look for specific information, we will have that information in front of us, and it will make it easier for us to locate that information as we read. Especially if we're doing research, it's important to understand where that information came from and how to get back to it later. All right, so we're going to practice with this short blurb. We're going to identify the main idea of this text. We're going to look at it. We're going to identify, we're going to utilize some of those reading strategies. We're going to preview the text. We're going to identify what background knowledge we have. We're going to make a prediction about the text, and then we're going to read it. So obviously there's no title, so we can't start there. The very first word is advertising. It jumps right out at you. If you kind of skim through it without reading all of the words, you can see that advertising or ads or advertisers is in there a number of times. So I can make the prediction that this is going to be somewhat about advertising. So if I have made that prediction, then I can help anchor my main idea. So when I start to read, my prediction is that this is going to be about advertising or ads in general. So as we work through it, what I want you to do at home is identify for me what you see repeated, what words are repeated in here, what words can you highlight or identify as being important to the text, and we'll come back to those at the end. So I'm going to read this out loud to you, and then you're going to identify what those are. All right. Advertising affects our lives every day. Brand names are common household words. We start each day using the toothpaste, soap, and breakfast foods promoted by advertisers. Ads have made the cars we drive signs of our success. Our choices of food, dress, and entertainment are swayed by ads. Not one aspect of American life is untouched by advertising. All right, so hopefully you have that list of words written down. If you haven't had a chance to finish that, you can pause me. I won't be offended if you pause me. Pause me and make a list of the words that jumped out to you that might help us identify what that main idea in the text is. One of the preview portions that I mentioned was, and prediction portions, was that it was going to be about advertising. And I made that assumption because of the quantity of times advertisers or ads is relevant or is introduced in the text. So obviously the first word is advertising, and that's what made me look for it in the first place. So we've got advertising here. We've got advertisers here. We have ads, which is just a short term for advertisement, right? We have another one, ads here, and then we have advertising again at the bottom. So at least five times in this text, we see the word advertising. So I think our prediction, as we've read it, is true. The focus of the topic is advertising. So we can identify the supporting detail there is the quantity of times, the repetition of the word advertising. So now our question is, well, what about advertising? Advertising might be an overarching topic, but it's not the main idea. What is this text trying to communicate to us about advertising in general? So if what jumps out to me in this text is the quantity of things that I use every day that they refer to: toothpaste, soap, breakfast food, dress or like fashion, cars. So all things that are relevant in our daily life, they reference, and that they talk specifically about our choices. Our choices of food, dress, and entertainment are swayed by ads. So this word swayed here is an important word. I don't know if you can see my arrow on it. Swayed is an important word in this text because it tells us something about the main idea. But it also tells us about, scroll into it. My computer is going crazy. All right, this one right here. No one aspect of American life is untouched by advertising. It is a very difficult thing to escape advertising, right? So from the word choices of swayed and untouched by advertising, as well as the repetition of the word advertising, we can identify that the main idea of this text here is that advertising permeates every aspect of our daily life, that we can't escape advertising, that we see it wherever we go. And that would be our main idea, that advertising impacts our daily life, that we cannot get away from it. All right, so let's move on to this next one. And here, before we do this portion, I am going to give you the next two letters of your password, which are B and B. So the same letter, double B's, B and B. So B and B. So remember, these are all lowercase letters. So I give you the first two letters early on in the video, and I'm giving you your second two letters now. All right, so find the main idea, solar eclipse. A solar eclipse occurs when the moon comes between the Earth and the sun. During an eclipse, the moon blocks all or part of the sun. Okay, so before we continue reading the remaining two paragraphs, let's preview our text and make predictions and identify important elements. So I read the very first couple sentences as a preview. I have the title is Find the Main Idea, Solar Eclipse. So obviously it's a lesson looking for the main idea, but it also tells us that the topic is solar eclipse. So I know before I even start reading that the article is about solar eclipse. We also have a picture, which does allow us, if we don't know what a solar eclipse is, we can visualize it. So the visual aid helps us. And then the caption also gives us the definition. The moon blocks the sun during a solar eclipse in August 2008. So we can infer from the caption that a solar eclipse is when the moon blocks the sun. So we gain some important information here in the reading of that caption. We can understand now what a solar eclipse is if we didn't know ahead of time. All right, so what I want you to do is pause your video right now, and I want you to read through the text, and I want you to identify on a separate sheet of paper what you, as you read through, what words stand out to you, what details stand out to you, and what elements of the text help you determine the main idea. And then we're going to talk about the main idea and review some of the ones that jump out to me. You can kind of match and see how that worked for you. So go ahead and pause now, and then I'm going to continue talking. So when you hit play, then you'll have moved on to the next portion of the lesson. Okay, so you hopefully have paused the recording and you have read through the text on the screen. So if you take a look at the words and information you have listed for yourself on your paper, I'm curious what jumps out to you. Obviously, Earth and Moon are repeated multiple times, if any of you guys have noticed that. The word eclipse is in there multiple times. What jumped out to me most is the words would happen. In the beginning of the second paragraph, a solar eclipse would happen every month if the orbits of the Earth and the Moon were perfectly circular and the Moon orbited on the same plane as the Earth's orbit around the Sun. Those words would happen. Okay, so a solar eclipse would happen, which insinuates that it does not happen every month. The next sentence says, however, the Earth's orbit and the Moon's orbit are not in perfect circles. They are both oval-shaped or elliptical. In addition, the Moon's orbit is not the same plane as the Earth's, but it's angled at about 5 degrees. This is important supporting detail because it identifies for us a difference in the Earth and the Moon's orbits, which does not allow them to line up perfectly every single month. The next sentence, the last sentence from the bottom of the second paragraph that starts with these, right here, I'll put my cursor over for you. These orbit characteristics provide fewer opportunities for the moon to be in the correct position to block the sun. Rather than happening every month, some type of solar eclipse happens only 2 to 5 times a year. Okay, so when you figure that there are 12 months in the year and only 2 to 5 times a year does a solar eclipse happen in that orbit period, what does that tell us about the frequency of the orbit? That would be my question, right? As I'm reading this, I would try to figure out the frequency of that orbit. And then our very last one, this word rarer here, also is a good supporting detail to support our understanding of the main idea of the text. A total solar eclipse for any given location is even rarer. And a total eclipse, the moon completely blocks the sun, leaving only a rim of light called the ring of fire. A total eclipse occurs somewhere on Earth about every 18 months. At any one location on Earth, however, we'll only be able to view a total eclipse about every 360 to 410 years. Oh, wow. Okay, so based on the information given, the statistics, the supporting detail of those statistics in our last paragraph, I feel safe claiming that the main idea of this text is that solar eclipses are rare and that total eclipses are even more rare, right? That a solar eclipse is a rare event. That's my takeaway from this section. And we can hit on that information, those ideas about how rare they are based on the statistical information given to us here in this last paragraph, as well as the statistical information given here. So hopefully that makes sense to you. If you have any questions about how I came to that conclusion, please let me know. All right, so how cute is that little puppy, right? This is our little breather, our little, oh, he's so cute. I'm going to put this up here. This is going to be part of your quiz when you get to that portion. This is going to be your one more time, your practice, one of your practices in the quiz itself. So you can pause it here and read it now if you want, or it will also be accessible to you in your quiz. All right, so let's look here at the now what. So I mentioned at the very beginning, you're going to use that password and access word I spelled out for you in the video. The last two words, the last two letters are IT. So you're going to put together all the letters that I've given you, and you're going to spell a word. Don't put any spaces in it. Just put the letters one after the other. So your last two are IT. So you should have 6 letters written down to spell a word, and it will spell a word that you recognize and are familiar with. So you're going to enter that in to access the quiz. If you have any questions or need any help, don't hesitate to reach out to me. If you need any assistance with any of the other elements of the course, also reach out to me. Have a great day.